Hello and welcome to episode 265 of our SAP on Azure video podcast. Today is October 31st, and together with Goran, we are here to talk about anything related to SAP and Microsoft. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
So
Hello.
for some countries, sovereignty in the context of running applications in the cloud becomes more and more important right now. There are lots of aspects when it comes to this, and different countries look at their own sovereign implementations. In Germany, the Delos Cloud is such a sovereign and secure cloud platform, and I'm really happy to have Marc Böhnke with us today. Welcome, Marc, to our show.
Thanks very much, Holger. Thanks. Hi, Goran, and hi, Holger.
Hey.
So it's really great to have you here because I mean obviously we were longtime colleagues. We were actually colleagues when we were at SAP. Then we were colleagues when we were at Microsoft, and well, now we're not colleagues anymore at the moment. But let's see.
But still friends.
Still friends, exactly. So
Yeah.
maybe before we dive into the topic, maybe you can quickly introduce yourself. What do you do at Delos Cloud?
Yes. Thanks, Holger. Thanks for the introduction. Happy to do so. So yeah, as you can see, my name, Marc Böhnke, you introduced me already. I'm with Delos Cloud since January 1st, so around about 11 months. The year is not full yet, but 11 months now. In the role of a so-called service owner, which is part of the Delos internal service operations organization, right? So this is not sales, not pre-sales or anything in between, not finance, it's operations. And we'll come to that when going in a little bit deeper into my history, career history. So we are dealing with a platform from a technical and operational perspective, right? And I think that makes it interesting to combine things. And before joining Delos, I had the pleasure to work with you guys, right? Directly at Microsoft for around about 6 years. We were in different units, but had a lot of touch points, I guess, in the SAP and Azure context, let's say, in the role of a CSA and then also CSA manager, getting to know the Azure platform pretty well, yeah, especially in the Azure context. And before that, I was at SAP, as you guys as well. So we share the same history here for almost 20 years, dealing with IT internal operation responsibilities, let's say, running SAP's internal business systems on data center hardware and later on also on Azure cloud infrastructure, right? And this is where things pretty nicely come together for me personally, right? From an operational standpoint, going a little bit back into that operational duty and role, but also having a good insight into the technology stack, from a hyperscaler perspective and what the whole hyperscaler technology and the services all can do in regards to scaling and flexibility and so on. But now in this new role, we're looking a little bit under the hood. Yeah, seeing how the cloud works in the internals, which is even more fascinating, I have to say.
So I can guess this is super interesting. I guess you have much deeper insights into Azure than I guess Goran and myself, because and we'll come to that in a second. There is a close collaboration between Delos, or a relationship between Delos and Azure and Microsoft, which we'll cover in a second. But maybe before we go there, maybe before we look at the architecture and what it actually is, maybe we can start with sovereignty, because I think, I mean, right now there are, as I mentioned in the intro, there are a lot of countries that take sovereignty much more seriously at the moment, I think.
Right.
And I think one implication or one result of this was also the Delos Cloud. So maybe Marc, maybe we can start with this, that you show us a little what actually is Delos. What is the idea behind Delos, and what does it mean for Germany?
Yes, we'll do so. And I think I can open my little slide deck I have prepared, and then we go over the topics. And let me share that right away. Perfect. And please let me know if you can see the presentation, if it works in full screen.
Yes,
okay,
perfect.
Very good. So what is Delos Cloud? Yeah, you already asked the questions. And maybe before we go into this, maybe a little bit of preface to the whole presentation. It will be all in German, and it's also what you can see here labeled as public content, right? So there is when we talk about sovereignty and everything which comes together here, also a little bit of sensitivity behind it, right? When it comes to statements, when it comes to technology topics and data protection and all these terms you all know. And this is why we are, of course, dealing with public content here and cannot dive potentially so deep maybe where we would like to. Two reasons. One, what I mentioned, maybe the sensitivity around sovereignty. And the other topic is, of course, we're diving pretty deep into the platform as such. And there we're also talking about Microsoft intellectual property. Yeah? So two things come together here. And this is why we might stay a little bit more high level than we could go. Yeah, but that's a different topic. The other thing is that the slides are all in German, right? So I will try to provide as best as possible a kind of an English audio track to the German presentation, because we're dealing with German target audience exclusively, right? It's for the German public sector. It's for public, let's say, entities, federal, local, municipalities. Oh, I love that word. And this is why the target audience is German. And that's also why this whole presentation, public slide deck, what I grabbed there is also in German. Yeah, just to let you know.
No, and I think this is a really important point. I mean, you'll talk about the benefits of this in a second, and obviously we saw a lot of SAP logos there as well, which also obviously shows the relationship to SAP. But I think if I am now seeing or listening to the podcast from the Netherlands or from the UK or from France, then this does not apply to you. SAP, the Delos Cloud is not for these countries. But I think a lot of concepts are the same. So I know in France we have Bleu or something like that. I forgot the exact name. Where they have a similar offering, I would say, also with Microsoft in this specific case, but also the core idea is the sovereignty, I think. And so Delos might not be you might not be able to use Delos, but I think what is clear is that countries are looking into this, and there are states that want to have a sovereign offering, and I think that's why, even if this might not apply to you one-on-one, I think the ideas that you'll share with us, or the concept that you'll share with us, are really relevant, or can be really relevant for a lot of folks across the globe.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. Yeah, and when you just imagine, as a contrary, you guys from Microsoft as a US company, there are also requirements from the US government for certain sovereignty, right? Which is then handled by a US company, which is Microsoft, with Azure Gov regions, where they have dedicated regions, infrastructure dedicated solely for the US government. And it's a comparable thing, right? But because Microsoft is a US company, they can provide it in the US, all fine. But as Microsoft is a US company for the German market, it's a different story. And that's why Delos exists as a legal entity.
Yeah, no, perfect. I like this analogy. And honestly, I mean, I have heard about Azure Gov obviously a lot of times. But honestly, I didn't make this connection. That you're absolutely right. Delos is more or less the same thing like, or a similar thing like Azure Gov for the US.
Correct. Yeah, and we can go a little bit deeper here when it comes to requirements. I'm not sure. Yeah, you know better from the statistics of your channel where your audience mainly comes from, but I guess the majority are also German native speakers. I assume. Yeah.
There are a lot of German. Yeah.
So they can, of course, read the slides, but we will go over this. Yeah, maybe before we go deeper into Delos specifically, just some name or logical clarifications. Yeah, it can confuse people all around when it comes to different offerings, and one, let's say, area of potential confusion, or where we need to maybe separate things a little bit from a wording and definition perspective, is Delos Cloud and what SAP provides as so-called SCI, which is also a term already known in the market, which is the SAP Cloud infrastructure, which you can see on the left side, right, where SAP offers also for the public sector infrastructure based out of Germany. Yeah, you know, Waldorf Road, SAP data centers exist, and SAP offers there also sovereign solutions out of that infrastructure. Yeah, you can see on the left side what are the requirements, what are the offerings. I have a later slide which goes a little bit more into detail, but this is then one region, as said, in Waldorf and Road. And there are certain requirements. One important thing is what is there listed as VSNFD, translated then into German, Verschlusssache nur für den Dienstgebrauch. Yeah, we have a lot of nice terms where it's all about the sensitivity of data, yeah, where it can be stored, who can access the data, and this needs to be, let's say, accredited, and SAP is doing a self-accreditation there to fulfill these requirements around VSNFD, yeah, as an example. Yeah, it also applies to Delos when we move to the right side, but it even goes further. Yeah, and we'll come to that in more detail. But just from a regional distribution point of view, we look at two regions, yeah, in the Frankfurt area geographically and the Berlin area. And as you can guess, as Azure specialists, it's comparable from the regional distribution. We're talking about Azure Cloud infrastructure here, to Germany West Central public region, right? Which is also in the Frankfurt area and the Berlin area. And there the geography is not too far away, meaning it's comparable to the public Azure region, but here in a fully sovereign context, meaning dedicated data centers with dedicated infrastructure, nothing shared and operated in a fully sovereign way. And we'll come to that in a minute. But just to compare it from a regional distribution point of view, it's not part of the Azure global region concept.
Yeah.
It's fully detached from that. Yeah, so you cannot, when you look in your Azure portal, select Delos as a region to deploy any infrastructure. That's simply not possible, right?
Yeah.
So
but just for clarity, Delos, the technology behind the Delos,
yes,
is Azure
correct.
technology, so to say.
Completely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when I have a slide which depicts that even a little bit
You will
better,
come to that later.
We will come to that, exactly. But that's the point where, let's say, we come together here in this podcast because everything is based on Microsoft technology at the end of the day. Yeah. Okay, let's maybe jump to the next view a little bit. We won't go too deep into this, and I guess you know this building, yeah, one of the SAP data centers, showing again a little bit more detail around the SAP Cloud infrastructure, just to differentiate. It's not tied directly to the Delos Cloud platform. Potentially, there could be an option for the future, but here the focus is, of course, as labeled there or worded on the very right, yeah, that it really focuses on the SAP solution portfolio, right? A lot of solutions which are typical for SAP, you all know that, like PCE, like the SuccessFactors suite, like BTP, and so on, are offered there, which is also a topic for the Delos Cloud, but we will come to that. Yeah, but here natively, of course, it's a huge focus, not solely, but mainly on the SAP portfolio, of course. When we talk, question? Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you.
No, all good. Yeah.
All good. When we talk about then the regulation around it, and here it becomes then interesting, right? The whole idea behind Delos was to build it from the very beginning with the guidance and participation of the regulator, yeah, in Germany, meaning it all needs to comply to German law and regulations coming from the BSI. BSI, just to translate it, is the Bundesministerium für Sicherheit in der Informationstechnologie. Yeah, all your English viewers will love this German term. But this is the federal entity, and I'm talking about federal here, not regional and not local government. It's about federal regulation, yeah, when we're talking about the so-called Bundesbehörden. So then the BSI is responsible to provide regulation around any kind of IT infrastructure the federal government uses or consumes at the end of the day. And they defined 9 so-called cloud platform requirements. Here it's in brackets called rote Linien. Yeah, that was the original term. There's also a link below where you can even read deeper. And there These 9 key areas were defined to ensure that the cloud platform fulfills or must fulfill all these requirements from the very beginning on. Yeah. So not that you start a project from an IT provider perspective and think you fulfill all requirements, and then you're ready, and then you ask the regulator to confirm and to audit and accredit and sign off. That's much harder, because then they will ask the questions what you should thought about in the very beginning.
Yeah.
And this was done in the correct way, I would say, from the very beginning, to involve the regulator from scratch. Right? And you can see it. Yeah, we talk about the operations model, which is important, that only the operations can be done locally. Yeah, and it needs to be fully provide autarky here. Yeah, so it is a really separated cloud environment, not interacting via network connectivity to any cloud outside of Germany, and so on. Yeah,
basically, it's not Microsoft operating; it's you.
It's us. Correct. Correct. Microsoft will hand over the complete cloud technology, operations procedures, everything what is required over to us, and also will hand over a little bit. Yeah. Welcome. We're all working in the same basement. There's a big steel door, and then Microsoft leaves the room, and we close the door and are fully responsible to open it again, to have it closed forever whatsoever. We are in the lead to manage that door into the cloud.
And I think that that's really a huge difference also. I mean, and that's what I meant, that you probably have much deeper insights now into Azure and how it works, because Goran and I mean, we know how to deploy a virtual machine, and we know how to script, we know the APIs, but I think you now, I mean, not necessarily you in person, but Delos now exactly knows what is happening behind. What is happening when I call this API? You know how to operate this, because you are now in control. There's basically not Microsoft support involved anymore. You are the one who are maintaining and operating this. So if I'm the federal government now, if I have an issue, then I talk to you. You are my main point of contact, basically.
Exactly. And we are also responsible for our customers, which are then the federal government, the local government entities, and whatsoever, to provide the infrastructure, the SLAs, and also the bill at the end of the day. Right? So we are the contractual partner then of the German government entities. That's the point. Microsoft is working here as a technology provider, you can say.
Makes sense, yeah.
And here is I find a nice depiction of these so-called red lines, or CPRs, from the BSI when it comes to the model of Delos Cloud, and we're talking about the, let's say, different sovereignty areas, right? We have first and foremost the whole topic of data sovereignty, meaning the data is localized in Germany strictly and only there, right? And it stays there. So this is very important, that it fully fulfills all requirements when it comes to German data protection laws and so on. This is absolutely clear. And also how the data is moving in and out of the cloud is fully under our or the government's entities' control at the end of the day. Nobody else's. Then we have the topic of technical sovereignty on the lower left part, right, which is then the physical location of the data centers, as I said, in Germany for sure here, and nowhere else. That it has a certain operations model, which is very important. We come to that on the right side when it comes to operations. But what is also important, which is meant here with Datenverschlüsselung, which is then encryption of data. It's not only that it is encrypted, we own the digital key infrastructure. Nobody else can decrypt or encrypt, because we have the full sovereignty about the encryption methods and keys and everything which is associated to that. So even if Microsoft or whoever wants to get in, they cannot decrypt the data anymore. So this is very important. Then, and this applies to my unit and my responsibility as well in our team, which is then the topic of operational sovereignty. Right? So it's important that all employees are security checked, background checked, are coming from a certain area of the world, Europe, and so on, that they're working out of Germany. You know these models also for SAP when it comes to EU-only access topics like this. Yeah? So this is not super new, but this is a clear requirement of the regulator as well. As we also work with an external operations partner, it applies the same for all these partners who are involved, right? So they all need to fulfill these sovereignty requirement when it comes to personnel. And then the last point, and I'm not a lawyer here, yeah, but we have the legal sovereignty, where it's important that Delos Cloud is not only located, but has its legal binding in Germany. It's a German GmbH. Yeah, they're the difference to SAP SE, which is a European legal entity. Already, that it's very important. The so-called Stammsitz, yeah, from a legal entity perspective, that no other laws can apply to this legal entity here in Germany.
So I think from a Microsoft perspective, I could argue the left-hand side, so data sovereignty and technical sovereignty, where we are saying, look, Microsoft is able to provide you with an Azure region in Frankfurt, for example, or in Germany. That's one of the offerings. Correct. And then potentially, when you as a customer, when you deploy a virtual machine, you can make sure that this virtual machine really stays in Germany. That is something that Microsoft says. Similarly, I would say, from a technology point of view, you can bring your own key, but then obviously you trust Microsoft. I mean, you can still own the key, but still there has to be some kind of trust, obviously. But I would say the left-hand side is something where Microsoft could clearly say, well, you don't need Delos for this. I mean, if there's some trust, but now obviously with Delos, there are the two sides on the right-hand side, the operations. Obviously, Microsoft does not have a team in Germany that runs the Azure regions in Germany, or also from a jurisdiction point of view. Microsoft is a US company, so these two sides are clearly something that only Delos can provide. And now I, as the federal government, for example, obviously, I trust now Delos with my key, with the encryption, for example. But especially again, the right-hand side, I think that is something that is absolutely unique in the context of Delos.
Yes. Maybe just to jump, as we are a technical podcast here, right, which I appreciate, coming back to the encryption and the key topic, you're absolutely correct. When we're talking about the Azure platform, the services a customer can consume, the customer brings their own key, or this for encryption of the services, let's say above ARM level. But even when we talk below, where we have inter-service communication, which is in the platform, all networking is encrypted in the foundational level, and all services talk to each other in an encrypted fashion. Also there, the key material completely belongs to us.
This is super interesting, and that's actually a very this is a very interesting point, because obviously the traffic on Azure is also encrypted, so on Azure Public. But as you said, Microsoft is owning this key for this for data at rest. Obviously, the customer can bring their own key, but then one of the things that we provide is that the traffic even within Azure is encrypted, but we as Microsoft own the key. And here, I hadn't thought about this, but okay, so now in the Delos concept, you actually own the key that is responsible for encrypting the traffic, as you saw, between, for example, Frankfurt and Berlin in this case.
Yes, and also on the hardware level, where the services, where the VMs communicate, and the hypervisors and everything.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. So this maybe can be an entry for a little bit more technical discussion when we say, how is this whole thing working, right? It's not that it's completely detached from the outside world, because as you can imagine, or everybody can imagine, this whole thing works not fully autark. I don't know if that's even an English term, forever, because services, IT services, when it comes to OSs, features whatsoever, need update. They need to have innovation applied. They need to be maintained. They have life cycles, everything. So Microsoft, as a technology provider, still provides updates into the platform, into the services when it comes to feature enhancements, new services, bug fixes, everything which is required, right? But here, as you can see in the middle, and maybe even going a step back before we call out names here, the whole cloud, here in this little thing here, Delos Cloud, as Goran said in the beginning, fully is built on Azure technology, on known Azure technology, and there's no difference there. A VM you can consume in Azure Public, a D series or an E series, is the same exactly as in Delos. Azure Functions or an app service is completely the same as in Azure Public. So no feature differences here. Only when it comes maybe to APIs, the naming of the APIs is different because we have an own DNS domain, of course, right?
Interesting. Okay.
So everything, the consumability, how the APIs are called, the tools which are used from an infrastructure as code perspective, everything remains the same. Only the endpoints will be named differently.
Okay,
of course,
the endpoints,
right?
but I still can use ARM. I can still
Absolutely.
use
You can
Bicep
use
to. Okay.
Bicep, Terraform,
And
everything is available. Yeah,
PowerShell, CLI,
absolutely. Absolutely.
same.
Okay.
Yeah. Portal is the
All
same, looks the same, maybe just a different address, but yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. There
Yeah.
will be a portal experience here, CLI experience, everything the same as you know it. But then we have so-called sovereign special service or special sovereignty services, whatever you want to call it, which are only built by Microsoft for the sovereign cloud environments. Yeah.
Okay.
And those services are dedicated to sovereign and are not required in public, of course. And this is which is there depicted as a nice German flag with the colors and called sovereign boundary, right? And what does this boundary do? It fully controls the data flow and the personal or let's say human account activity flow. Yeah. As you can imagine, for certain reasons, there might be support required from an engineering perspective to fix something, to help with something whatsoever. And then in an escorted fashion, a Microsoft engineer, as an example, can be escorted digitally into the cloud, fully audited, fully controlled, fully supervised, fully recorded, and so on. And there's a special technology or service which provides this functionality. Yeah? Very complex, but very sophisticated as well. The same is working from the data flow perspective, which data comes in, how this data is then audited, which protocols are used, how it is inspected, how it is stored, how pipelines are managed, everything around the deployment or distribution of data is fully controllable in this boundary. So you imagine there's a special services which allows these kinds of capabilities which are simply not required in public Azure, right? With the capability of the regulator to dive in there as well. Yeah, just to give you an example, which I found pretty interesting, when we learned about this cloud transfer service, to let data in or also to let data out for certain requirements. I will come to that in a minute. The regulator was present. So Microsoft provides full transparency to Delos, what operational effort, knowledge is required to manage this thing, and also to give the regulator, the BSI, the insights how this technically works. To give feedback, to come with, let's say, uncertainties, and maybe even enhancements which are required, where Microsoft then provides then the architecture which the regulator needs to see at the end of the day. So this was pretty insightful, I have to say. And maybe the upper line, when it comes about egress, this is of course a very sensitive section when data leaving the cloud. But here we're talking about very selective data, which can be fully monitored and controlled. As you can imagine, when something is deployed into the cloud, I would assume, don't quote me on that because I don't have all the details yet, but like a feature is deployed into the cloud, an API gets a new version, The telemetry, which then proves that it has been successfully deployed and rolled out in Delos, needs to go back to Microsoft because this manages the pipelines at the end of the day. The acknowledged new service has this new feature set, has this new version number. This information, of course, needs to flow back to Microsoft for future updates, and telemetry around this, from a platform perspective. So this is, but as said, this is fully controlled, fully controllable, fully auditable, and also fully stoppable.
Exactly. So you can say,
cases.
Exactly. So some telemetry data, maybe you're saying, no, this should not be sent, then it's not sent back. Interesting.
Exactly.
So, I mean, now we know, and you already talked about D series, E series, but what are some other services that I get from the Delos Cloud?
Yeah, and and I think this is maybe the most interesting point. We are all, the three of us, coming from the Azure world in many cases. I mean, Holger, you're all over the place, but I think which is really insightful also, where the public sector customers have a big demand, let's say, is it when it comes to the productivity suite, right? So the single point or unique selling point, I would say, of Delos is that we also provide the Office suite or the productivity suite of Microsoft in a sovereign fashion. Teams, Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, Power BI, whatever. So this is then consumable in a fully sovereign fashion out of Delos for the public sector customers. And this is a huge, besides all the Azure services we talked about to build solutions, the SaaS solutions of Microsoft come with it. And I think this is pretty fascinating.
And this is really cool from my point of view, because if I'm a federal entity, and I mean, we know how good Copilot or Teams and the Outlook integration and Exchange and Word, how well this works together, and how, for example, from a Logic app, I can easily connect and send something to Teams or retrieve information there.
Right.
If I'm now in a federal entity and I can leverage the same thing, but in a very controlled environment where I know that everything complies to the sovereign requirements from BSI, I think this will open up a lot of doors, a lot of possibilities for the government.
Right. And this is then open for innovation and interoperability between own solutions, Office solutions. You know the integration story much better, right, around this.
Nice.
And maybe to put the cherry on the cake, it doesn't stop there, because now we come back to SAP. I would say, right? So we're in SAP on Azure in the Delos Context podcast today. And what you can see here in a maybe abstracted way, again, what are the consumers at the end of the day on the very top, Bundesbehörden, Landesbehörden, Kommunen. So Holger, we had the chat, Kommunen or municipalities would be the city of Speyer, you live in. It could be an interesting entity who has a certain demand, and they then can consume whatever they need. One is, of course, what you see here on the left side, the Office and the Azure portfolio to build on that or to consume Office. Everybody is, of course, keen on Teams and other solutions for productivity. But also, which is important, maybe the city of Speyer has certain digital Fachverfahren, so to call it, special solutions. So this is again public sector talk, where a digital process, simply saying you need to order from the city of Speyer a dedicated parking voucher for your street for the validity of 1 year. Then you have maybe a digital process or a portal where you can request that. And this would be, if the data, maybe your personal data, is sensitive and the city of Speyer wants to store this in a sovereign fashion, this could be a digital process, the city of Speyer, or a partner, could be an ISV solution built for them on top of the infrastructure or PaaS stack of Azure in this case, right? So this would be one important use case for government entities. And another one is maybe they consume SAP as well. Maybe they even use an ERP system, or they do their whole human resource topic through SuccessFactors. I don't know. SAP is a big topic in the public sector as well. So SAP will also become an ISV, so to say, on Delos. and provide their solutions, PCE, HXM, BTP, whatever is in scope there, also on Delos as a cloud platform provider, simply said, for the German public sector where the customers required full sovereignty, which can be delivered out of Delos. So this kind of brings the whole portfolio together.
So does it mean also that like SAP or any other ISV vendor who are generally operating also the SAP on some cloud infrastructure can offer such services on the top of the Delos Cloud?
Theoretically, yes. We're talking about two things, right, Goran? One would be like a partner or a solution provider offering SAP service on Delos infrastructure or Azure Delos infrastructure, so to say, or SAP itself, the RISE ECS context, right?
Yeah, that was a bit context.
Yeah, both options are possible. In this case. But here PCE is one big topic. BTP, of course, is a topic, and other solutions which will be provided out of Delos in the future as well.
Okay.
This is really powerful, because I think there are a lot of debates always. Can I use it? Can I not use it? Then, I mean, personally, and obviously I'm a little biased. I obviously also checked out LibreOffice and a few open source, but it's a lot of things are working, but a lot of things are also not working. And there's a lot of convenience in using something like Office 365. So now having this as a standardized offering for the federal government, basically to say, look, now I can use Office without any complaints or without any concerns. I think that's a huge thing. Now, obviously, if I look at this, one thing that is missing is AI, but I think I saw some announcements there as well. Can you share some information on that as well?
Yeah, as you said, right, there are already announcements done by SAP, OpenAI, together with Microsoft and Delos, and this is already out in the public. And what is now happening is trying to be more precise, and come from an, let's say, idea phase or honeymoon phase, so to say, in a real negotiation and contractual bound and certified phase, in a couple of weeks or potentially months.
Of course.
We don't know how long this takes, but this is happening as we speak, for sure.
Nice.
And the question there is really, again, what is the demand? Of course, AI is very powerful in the market. We're not only talking about Copilot, we're talking about AI Foundry here from an Azure perspective or Microsoft perspective, but also from an ISV perspective, right? Simply providing GPU-based infrastructure to ISV to build their own AI solutions on it, right? So there are many use cases which are in the play here. And this is heavily discussed at the moment and negotiated and detailed out, because, as you can imagine, it has a lot of implications, right? So one is, of course, we know all that GPU-based infrastructure does not come for free. So there's a lot of investment is required. A lot of capacity is required. When we talk about building out clusters of GPU-based infrastructure, so we're talking about space and energy here. So there are a lot of requirements there, and it has to be figured out if it can all be supplied. And now it's coming back to my area. There are operational requirements potentially. Right? So what you mentioned in the beginning, we might already know more than you guys, because we already have insights a little bit. How does Teams under the hood work? What is the architecture Teams is running on? What is the architecture Exchange Online is running on? What is the architecture Azure Functions or Azure databases are running on? And there might be special requirements where AI Foundry is running on. So this means we need dedicated operational resources. We need respective skills potentially. So this is also, of course, a big topic of discussion at the moment. But yes, to confirm your statement, this is happening as we speak. And I think there's a big use case for that, for sure.
And it's to expect it to anyway to broaden the service offerings, which are continuously coming. So that's of course.
Yeah.
So you will be busy for the next months and years.
I have to say, I didn't really know what to expect when I started, but it's super broad. It's super complex. We see that Microsoft is building this cloud with thousands, 10,000s. We don't know how much and how many, a huge organization, this cloud platform. And of course, we need to operate it with a much smaller team. So to figure out what are the operational processes, what skills are required at the end of the day, how deep we need to go, have to go, should go, how this scale in the best fashion. So there are a lot of things to be learned and then derived from that, but it's also super fascinating, as you can imagine.
Well, Marc, thank you for this fascinating insight into Delos Cloud. I personally, I mean, I've read a few things, obviously, but now getting these insights for you, and I think you provided a lot of information, and I know you could have done much more technical and much more deeper, but I think then we all need to sign an NDA or something,
yeah, potentially,
even if possible. So, no, really, thank you so much for these insights. And as I said in the beginning, I don't think this is only relevant for German customers. I think this is also interesting for others that face similar questions. So I think this was really great.
Yeah. And it's actually, I'm just thinking it's easier for customer and ISVs who knows already Azure, right?
Absolutely.
And using Azure just to just have an even more enhanced security, but just still use it in the same way. So just reuse the existing knowledge. It's not a new cloud, new APIs.
Exactly.
It's existing stuff.
Exactly.
And that's really lowers the burden of onboarding, so to say, right?
For sure. We
Nice.
see it the same way. Absolutely. Thank you.
Great.
It was a pleasure.
Great.
Thank you so much. And we'll see each other again, I guess. Maybe in a few months or years, whenever there's another update, maybe we can invite you back, and then you can provide also an update on what's new with the Delos Cloud.
For sure. Thanks, guys.
Great.
See you soon.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Take care.